This is the shocking true story of how a prisoner escaped a high-security prison using nothing but soap and water. In just a moment, you'll discover the quiet trick guards never noticed and the single decision that made the escape possible. If you enjoy real prison escapes and impossible breakouts, subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. You won't want to miss this. The air above the San Francisco Bay maintained a temperature of 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Below, the water measured 50 degrees Fahrenheit. A structure, 250 feet high, rose from the water's surface. This was the West Cell Block of Alcatraz, a federal penitentiary. On the night of June 11, 1962, 3 inmates descended this concrete wall. Their escape required a vertical drop, then navigation across a 1.5-mile expanse of cold, turbulent water. They moved against a 6-knot current, aiming for Angel Island. Each man carried a single item, a makeshift paddle constructed from plywood. The paddles were used to propel a small hand-assembled raft. The raft consisted of 50 raincoats, bonded together with a rubber-based adhesive. This vessel offered limited buoyancy for 3 men and minimal protection from the bay's conditions. The combined weight of the men and their raft strained the adhesive seams. A failure in any seam would lead to rapid water intake and immediate sinking. A single misstroke of a paddle or an unexpected wave could capsize the fragile craft. The men faced hypothermia within 30 minutes of exposure to the 50-degree water. Survival required reaching land before the onset of uncontrollable shivering, loss of coordination, and eventual unconsciousness. The nearest land, Angel Island, was a 90-minute journey by their improvised craft, assuming optimal conditions. Strong currents made this journey unpredictable and increased the risk of being swept out into the Pacific Ocean. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary stood on a remote island in San Francisco Bay. It was designed to be escape-proof. The prison's construction, completed in 1934, incorporated reinforced concrete and high-grade steel. Its location, surrounded by cold, swift currents and patrolled waters, was considered a natural barrier. Federal authorities described Alcatraz as maximum security. Warden Paul Madigan stated, "No one has ever escaped Alcatraz alive." The institution's design integrated multiple layers of security. External walls extended 12 feet above ground level. Barred windows, 9 inches by 4 inches, were too small for a human body. Steel doors, 2 inches thick, secured each cell. Regular cell inspections, daily counts, and perimeter patrols formed the operational security. For 29 years, the system had held. This environment created the impression of total control and absolute containment. At 6:30 a.m. on June 12, 1962, Officer William Long conducted his routine cell block decount. He stopped at cell 138. The sleeping form in the bunk appeared undisturbed. He moved to cell 132, occupied by brothers John and Clarence Anglin. Both forms also appeared asleep. Officer Long completed his count, logged it, and proceeded with his shift. The guard patrols continued. The cell block remained quiet. The prison routine proceeded without deviation. No alarms sounded. No unusual activity was reported. For 30 minutes, the prison staff maintained the belief that all 260 inmates were accounted for within the walls. The escape had occurred hours earlier. The elaborate deception of the inmates kept authorities unaware during critical hours of the morning. The genesis of this escape began months earlier. In January 1962, Frank Lee Morris, a federal prisoner, arrived at Alcatraz. Morris, born in Washington, D.C., possessed a history of multiple arrests and convictions for bank robbery and burglary. His criminal record included 5 previous escape attempts from other correctional facilities. Morris was an individual with above-average intelligence, indicated by IQ tests showing scores in the 130 range. He exhibited a methodical approach to problem-solving. At Alcatraz, he was assigned cell 138 in the West Cell Block. This block also housed John and Clarence Anglin, 2 brothers from Donaldsonville, Georgia. The Anglins, convicted bank robbers, had been transferred to Alcatraz after repeated escape attempts from other prisons. All 3 men faced sentences that effectively amounted to life imprisonment. Their motivation was direct: permanent freedom from incarceration. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary represented the pinnacle of correctional design in the mid-20th century. The cell walls consisted of reinforced concrete, 12 inches thick. Steel bars formed the cell doors and window gratings. Each cell measured 5 feet by 9 feet. The ventilation system, a series of shafts and utility corridors, ran behind the cells. These shafts, approximately 3 feet wide, contained plumbing and electrical conduits. Access to these corridors was restricted by a 6-inch by 9-inch ventilation opening in the back wall of each cell. This opening was covered by a steel grating, secured with 4 steel rivets. The rivets were hardened and designed to resist tampering. Constant patrols of guards, guard towers, and the cold waters of the bay were the outer layers of the system. The prison structure itself was considered impenetrable from the inside. The primary obstacle to escape lay in the steel ventilation grating at the back of each cell. The grating's dimensions and the material strength appeared to preclude any manipulation. The rivets securing the grating were designed for permanent installation. Behind the grating lay the utility corridor, a pathway to the roof and external walls. Gaining access to this corridor was the initial, seemingly impossible problem. The noise generated by any attempt to remove the grating would alert guards. Furthermore, the corridor itself was dark and confined, presenting additional challenges for navigation without detection. Frank Morris initiated the plan. His cell, Cell 138, was adjacent to cells occupied by the Anglin brothers. Morris observed that the concrete around the ventilation grating had been degraded by moisture and the saline air of the bay over decades. He noted that the original steel of the grating was also corroded. This degradation was minor but provided a vulnerability. The plan involved exploiting this weakness. Over several months, Morris, along with John and Clarence Anglin, began to chip away at the concrete surrounding their ventilation openings. Their tools were improvised, spoons stolen from the mess hall, sharpened into primitive chisels. A small discarded vacuum cleaner motor was converted into a drill. A piece of metal tubing from a shower fixture was adapted as a bit for this motor. This allowed for quieter, more efficient removal of the hardened concrete. To conceal their work, the inmates developed several methods. The holes in the concrete were covered by painted cardboard panels. These panels were meticulously matched to the cell wall's color and texture. They were attached with soap, shaped to mimic the surrounding concrete. This camouflage allowed them to work during the night and replace the panels before morning inspections. The noise of chipping and drilling was masked. The Anglin brothers had a collapsible concertina, accordion, which they played during recreational periods. This provided auditory cover for the work being done in the cells. The collected concrete dust was disposed of carefully, either flushed down the toilet or scattered outside during recreation time. This process of excavation required precision and a lack of detection over a sustained period. The escape required specific, unlikely objects. The most critical items included 50 raincoats, several rolls of toilet paper, soap, and a stolen vacuum cleaner motor. The raincoats, issued to inmates for outdoor work, were collected over months. These were covertly stored in the utility corridor behind their cells. The inmates used heat from radiator pipes to bond the raincoats together, forming a waterproof material for a raft. They applied a rubber-based adhesive, also stolen from maintenance supplies, to further seal the seams. The vacuum cleaner motor was disassembled. Its internal fan mechanism was repurposed into an improvised drill bit, providing a rotary cutting action against the corroded steel. Soap, mixed with cement dust and water, became a key material. This mixture was molded into realistic dummy heads. These heads featured human hair, acquired from the prison barbershop floor, glued onto them. The dummy heads, placed in the bunks, were essential for delaying discovery. June 11, 1962, marked the culmination of months of preparation. The weather forecast indicated dense fog for the evening, a critical factor for concealment. The tide schedule presented a specific window, high tide around midnight, with the current moving away from the Golden Gate Bridge towards Angel Island. This timing was crucial for a successful water crossing. At approximately 9:30 p.m., the lights in the west cell block dimmed. This was the standard operational procedure for the night. The prison became quiet, save for the distant sounds of the bay. The final preparations inside the cells were made. The dummy heads were positioned in the bunks, covered with blankets, their faces turned towards the wall to mimic sleeping inmates. At 9:45 p.m., the three men initiated the final phase of their escape. Frank Morris, followed by John Anglin, then Clarence Anglin, slipped through their open ventilation holes. The holes, expanded to 10 inches by 14 inches, now allowed passage. They entered the 3-foot-wide utility corridor. Their movement was slow and calculated to avoid generating noise that might travel through the ventilation system. The corridor provided access to the roof of the cell block. They climbed 30 feet of vertical plumbing pipes within the corridor. Reaching the roof, they used a series of improvised tools to breach a roof vent. This involved a modified wrench used to pry open the steel grating of the ventilation shaft exit. Once on the roof, they traversed its length, approximately 100 feet, moving towards the east side of the building. Their objective was the prison's smokestack. They then descended 50 feet down a drainage pipe on the side of the prison, reaching the ground level. At the base of the prison wall, they moved to a secluded area near the laundry building. There they inflated their raft using a small hand-operated bellows, also made from raincoat material. The raft, assembled from the 50 raincoats, measured approximately 6 feet by 14 feet when fully inflated. The inflation process took approximately 30 minutes. At approximately 11:30 p.m., they entered the 50-degree water of the San Francisco Bay. Each man used a paddle, fashioned from a piece of plywood. They pushed off from Alcatraz Island, navigating the 1.5-mile distance towards Angel Island. The fog, as predicted, provided visual cover. The 6-knot current pulled at their craft. The immediate area around Alcatraz was subject to strong eddies and undertows. Their small raft was designed for minimal stability. The journey involved continuous paddling, directing the raft against the cross-currents. The escape succeeded in a way that defied the prison's reputation. At some point between 11:30 p.m. and 1 a.m. on June 12, 1962, the 3 men reached the shoreline of Angel Island. There, they abandoned the raft and their paddles. The escape was not marked by a dramatic confrontation or a clear path to freedom. Instead, they simply walked onto solid ground, leaving the prison island behind. The specific point of their landfall was a rocky cove on the north side of Angel Island. Their immediate actions after reaching land remain unconfirmed. The discovery of the escape occurred hours later. At 6:30 a.m., during the routine morning count, Officer William Long returned to cell 138. The inmate in the bunk did not respond. Officer Long shook the figure. The head detached from the body, falling onto the floor. It was a dummy. Immediately, the officer sounded the alarm. Warden Olin G. Blackwell was notified. A full-scale search of the cell block commenced. The cells of John and Clarence Anglin were also found to contain dummy heads. The ventilation holes in all 3 cells were open, revealing the utility corridor. The escape had been confirmed. The FBI immediately initiated a large-scale manhunt. Special Agent in Charge J. Edgar Hoover directed the operation. The U.S. Coast Guard deployed multiple vessels and aircraft to search the waters of San Francisco Bay and the Pacific Ocean. The search covered a radius of 200 miles around Alcatraz. Law enforcement agencies in California, Nevada, and Oregon were alerted. Wanted posters featuring the 3 escapees were distributed nationwide. News of the escape became a national event. Initial search efforts focused on the bay. Within days, several items were recovered. On June 13, 1962, a plastic bag containing a wallet, photographs, and family addresses belonging to Clarence Anglin was found floating 200 yards off Angel Island. The next day, a portion of an improvised paddle was discovered 50 yards from Alcatraz. On June 16, a partially deflated raincoat raft was found washed ashore on Angel Island. These discoveries fueled the official theory that the men had drowned. However, no bodies were ever recovered. Despite extensive land and sea searches, the 3 men vanished. The escapees were never officially captured. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers became legendary figures. The FBI maintained active wanted posters for decades. The United States Marshal Service continues to list them as fugitives. Despite numerous reported sightings and theories, no verifiable evidence of their survival or death has ever materialized. The lack of bodies contributed to an enduring mystery, challenging the official presumption of drowning. This unconfirmed fate leaves the case unresolved. The successful escape, despite the lack of confirmed survival, significantly impacted Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. The institution's reputation as escape-proof was fundamentally compromised. The operational costs of maintaining Alcatraz were already substantial. The saline air caused extensive corrosion to the concrete and steel structure. The escape accelerated the decision to close the prison. On March 21, 1963, less than a year after the escape, Alcatraz ceased operations as a federal penitentiary. The facility was deemed too expensive to maintain and too difficult to secure effectively against determined inmates. New security protocols were implemented across the federal prison system, including enhanced cell inspections, more frequent structural maintenance, and revisions to ventilation system designs. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers remain officially listed as fugitives. The FBI case was closed in December 1979, but the U.S. Marshal Service continues to pursue leads. Their legal status is unchanged. No death certificates have been issued. The escape remains one of the most famous and debated in American history. The Alcatraz escape stands as a historical anomaly. 3 inmates achieved freedom from a prison designed to prevent it, then vanished without a trace, leaving a permanent question regarding their ultimate fate.